Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting.
In 2002, Nintendo and developer Silicon Knights released a psychological horror game titled Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. Being Nintendo's first ever published M-rated game, this title looked to bring horror to a different level never before seen, by breaking the fourth wall and coming after you, the player, directly. So, is this psychological horror journey one worth braving, or is it best evading the darkness that lies ahead? Let's find out.
You too will come to understand fear as I have.
Eternal Darkness' story begins with Edward Roivas narrating about a darkness that has plagued many who have come across his path over time. Specifically, those who came across a book called the Tome of Eternal Darkness. The Roivas lineage has long fought to understand the darkness, as well as several other unfortunate souls over the course of 2,000 years. Shortly, we find Edward's granddaughter surrounded in a room fighting off the darkness until she awakens from this nightmare. However, when she awakens, she then receives a phone call from Detective Legrasse that her grandfather Edward has been murdered and to come to his mansion to verify the body. Upon getting there, she sees the mutilated body, but recognizes his ring on his finger to verify it. She decides to stick around the mansion and try to find clues as to what or who killed her grandfather. Once finding the Tome of Eternal Darkness hidden in his study, Alex will experience the events of the unfortunate souls that have gone through the struggles facing the horrors they witnessed. The first is Pius Augustus, whom in turn becomes the game's main villain upon choosing one of the elements that represents an ancient. These ancients are Ulyaoth, Zelatoth, and Chaturga, all of which represent a certain in-game element that I will explain shortly. Upon completing each chapter, Alex will find other ways to navigate the mansion to get more clues and bring the darkness to an end. Or will she? This is only a fraction of the game's deep story, but if you haven't played it yet, I really don't want to spoil more than this introduction to the story itself. Overall, the story here is very intriguing, and witnessing the events of every character you play as is exciting. Furthermore, the game has a secret ending for completing 3 playthroughs, making the choice for each ancient on each playthrough. Also, one more tidbit that'll blow your mind if you haven't seen it yet, Alex comes from the Roivas family that, as mentioned, has been dealing with the darkness for quite some time, and you will play as a few of them. The last name Roivas, when spelt backwards, actually spells out Savior. Yeah, 14-year-old me never saw that, and this blows my mind. So, just from the story alone, you already know that Eternal Darkness will be unlike any other horror game you've played. Playing as 12 characters total, each character plays very unique. Their movement speed, health, magic meter, sanity meter, and stamina all vary drastically amongst each other. Taking place across 2 millennia, each character's weapons will also be unique, whether using Kareem's dual swords, to Elia's dagger, to Peter's World War I weaponry, to Alex's more modern weaponry. It makes for every character's chapter to feel fresh and engaging. While you will revisit various locations 2 or 3 times in different time periods, the areas are changed based on the time passed. Enough is changed in both the environment details and character mechanics where it evades the repetition completely. Controls are incredibly tight, with ultra-responsive movement and actions. Movement is fully 3D, so no tank controls here as many horror games had at the time, although there's nothing wrong with tank controls, by the way. I still love those controls. Anywhere you push on the analog stick will move your character in that direction, and you can sprint with the L button. Careful though, all characters will get tired from running too much and need to slow down to catch their breath before running again. As mentioned, every character's stamina is different, so some of the more unfit characters will get winded quickly. When searching the environment, the B button will appear as a context-sensitive button on the top right corner. This will let you know if there's an object to examine, open, activate, etc. You will use the R button to get into a combat ready stance. at which point you can use the analog stick to target enemies' limbs, such as their head, arms, and torso. This is interesting, as going for the head may not always be the immediate solution. See, if enemies have their head and look at you directly, they will use their eyes to drain your sanity, whereas they'll use their arms to naturally attack you. When they're down, you can finish them off with the B button when prompted. Doing so will actually replenish your sanity meter a bit. You can also attack enemies by not holding down R and just pressing the A button a few times to do a combo, but I felt like this was a weaker way to attack enemies as it didn't take down their limbs as quickly. The combat is simple enough to grasp in this sense, but let's get a bit deeper into the complexity by adding in magic runes. As you acquire magic runes, you can also summon spells to assist in your journey. As you face off against the darkness, various enemies will contain new runes for you to utilize on crafting new spells. Now, Eternal Darkness has a very robust magic system here, in which you must find scrolls that show you how to craft certain spells you will need to complete certain chapters. However, if you happen to miss the scrolls, you can also experiment with the runes and see if you can craft the spell needed on your own. Spells will also have different element effects based on which ancient ruin you choose to incorporate into your magic. Chattur'gha represents your health, Ulyaoth your magic, and Xel'lotath your sanity. For example, one of the spells is Recover, but if you mix it with Chattur'gha, you'll be able to recover your health. If you mix it with Xel'lotath, you'll be able to recover your sanity meter. Additionally, you will also find various point tablets. These are what allow you to determine the strength of each magic spell that you cast. There are 3-point, 5-point, and 7-point medallions that can be accrued throughout the game. The higher the point scale, the stronger the spells. But be careful, as not only do they use more magic, but take much longer to cast a spell. Also, a great touch is being able to assign quick spells to the D-pad and Y button. This allows you to just go ahead and program up to 5 spells to use on the fly without having to use the game's inventory menu. Other spells you can cast are elements like enchanting items, summoning creatures to control as, creating a shield, and much more. The magic system may seem complex, but the game does an excellent job teaching you how it works, and it becomes second nature in no time.
Deep into that darkness pit.
This isn't really happening!
Now, earlier I mentioned that this is a psychological horror instead of survival horror, because, well, it is a game that will question your sanity, the player. When your sanity meter is low, and you fail to replenish it, expect the unexpected.
This can't be happening!
I see that you enjoy Nintendo games. You like Silicon Knights games, don't you? So, you like adventure games? Did you enjoy playing Eternal Darkness?
This isn't really happening!
Okay, maybe the Metal Gear 1's not actually one of the sanity effects that's actually in this game, or is it? These moments are only a fraction of what the game will do to mess with you, the player, by questioning what is real and what is insane. While I won't spoil all of the possible scenarios the game will throw at you, coming across these is part of the experience. To this day, no other game has ever dabbled into this concept, mostly due to Nintendo owning the rights and patent for the sanity system that's in effect here, and they've never used it again ever since. Seriously, this aspect scared the hell out of me back when I was 14 years old playing this game, and to this day, nearly 20 years later, it still does. One thing is messing with the player in the game for horror aspects, but breaking the fourth wall and messing with you, the player, directly, that's brilliant. Throughout the game's chapters, expect to solve various puzzles. This will be anything from clock puzzles, to tracking down keys, to utilizing spells to unveil invisible walls, and more. There is even one part in the game that rewards you for backtracking to grab what is essentially the best elemental ancient ruin that's a combination of all three ancients' elements. Now, the game also has a few boss fights, and at first I was a bit bummed out that there were only 2 big boss fights in my first playthrough. However, note the first playthrough part. When you restart the game choosing a different artifact at the beginning, the first main boss fight much farther into the game does change drastically. Same goes for the third playthrough as well. This actually nullified my gripe and was another clever aspect to the game. The final boss though, that is such an awesome fight, in part thanks to its phenomenal song for the battle itself.
Are you trying to fight me or entertain me, little one?
Upon beating the game, you will unlock a new game plus in a sense. You can start a new playthrough to try and do a different path with deciding which ancient Pius will select. Doing all 3 playthroughs will net you the secret ending to wrap up the story with an epilogue. Additionally, you can replay any character's chapter upon beating the game, which is a great feature. And lastly, getting the game's final ending will grant you Eternal Mode, which will let you replay chapters with invincibility. This is a nice reward to earn and a great way to try and experience more sanity effects without worrying about your health. Eternal Darkness's visuals are excellent to say the least. Being a game that was originally developed for the N64, the game got a nice overhaul onto the GameCube. Rich texture work, fluid animations, nicely designed environments based in the time periods, and excellent lighting. It all culminates in an atmospheric delight. Add in the fact that the game runs at a locked 60 frames per second, which was unheard of for any horror game at the time, and what's here is seriously impressive. Some of the environments are so well designed too, and have character to them. For example, the Tome of Eternal Darkness room over here, with the faces of those who succumb to the darkness screaming in agony as you run on the floor, it's such an unnerving room to run in, and the detail brought here evokes that sensation. The only minor gripe I have about the visuals are probably the characters' facial models, because they do have a bit more polygonal design here where you can actually see where it separates the body and the head. It is nitpicky, but it's something that always stood out to me back when I first played this. But again, nitpicky, it doesn't affect anything realistically, it's just something to point out. In terms of audio, be ready for sounds to send chills down your spine. The creepy atmospheric tones, the sanity system completely messing with you by hearing loud banging on the door, creepy voices. This is a rich audio experience. Voice acting is also very well done, with Jennifer Hale voicing Alex Roivas, Cam Clark as Anthony, Paul Eiding as Paul Luther, Kim May Guest as Elia, and David Hayter as this soldier here for just a few lines. Actually, if I didn't know any better, I'd say this was already a hint that Silicon Knights was already hard at work with Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes based on this cast. Everyone does a great job here by fleshing out the story more. The game also has a Sublime Soundtrack that composer Steve Hennepin nailed. Every track fits the game's aesthetics and time periods, while the final boss track, yeah, that goes down as one of the best songs for the GameCube generation. I love the fact that music is playing 95% of the time throughout the game, and that it accompanies the game perfectly, and sticks with you well after turning the game off. Crank up the volume to the max, and truly take in this audio experience. Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem is a game that is second to none when it comes to psychological horror. Its Lovecraftian themes coupled with Edgar Allan Poe influence, creepy atmosphere, great combat, well thought out scenario designs, and fantastic sound design make this an unforgettable experience. Add in the one-of-a-kind sanity system and its effects, and you have a game that you can't experience anywhere else. Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem is a masterclass in game design, and one that every GameCube owner and horror enthusiast must experience. Not only is this one of the GameCube's finest games made, it is one of the greatest games ever made.